She couldn't leave the missing name alone. The file sat like a blank tooth in a mouth of brass and ink. Neat rows of model, serial, timestamp, and then that pale, impossible gap labeled maker. Did Annie trace the empty line with a fingertip as if she might feel a signature beneath the paper? Around them, the archive hummed, patient, polite, but her curiosity felt loud enough to unseat a city. Arbot stood by, a small warm light in his chest, watching the way her jaw tightened. Some mysteries are meant to be left unread. Some people are not built for leaving things undone. She gathered the index cards, folded the blank into her palm, and decided she wouldn't go home without a name. They went where the city kept its lost things. The grate took them down like a secret ladder, a dizzying slide from brass facades to a stitched underworld of stalls. Lanterns hung on ropes, jars glowed like little moons, and the air smelled of oil and sweetened metal. Annie pulled Arbot by the hand with the practiced certainty of someone who knows how to find wonder even in the worn. He scanned without judgment, the teal of his HUD painting curious patterns across filament lights. People traded scraps and stories, and every object seemed to be cataloged by affection rather than authority. Down here, you could buy a repaired idea for a handful of coins and a good story. It felt, somehow, exactly like the beginning of a plan. In corners, the city's thrown-away ideas grew a life of their own. Blueprints dangled like prayer flags, jars labeled small courage hummed, and crates carried stenciled histories that rarely matched the goods inside. The market moved in quaint chaos, a system held together by hands and habit, and in a shadowed nook, a pair of soot-streaked goggles watched. In corners, the city's thrown-away ideas grew a life of their own. Blueprints dangled like prayer flags, jars labeled small courage hummed, and crates carried stenciled histories that rarely matched the goods inside. The market moved in quaint chaos, a system held together by hands and habit, and in a shadowed nook, a pair of soot-streaked goggles watched. Aster treated lost code like lost letters. Her workshop was a small, glorious tangle, shelves of jars, clipped schematics with corners folded like notes, and tools that looked part science, part poetry. When Annie put the R1 to scrap on the bench, Aster's eyes lit in a way that made you half suspect mischief, half genius. She leaned in as if the torn paper were a secret being whispered. Arbot watched politely, sensors mapping the moment. Aster's hands moved with precision and a kind of affection you only reserve for things that have been misunderstood. She didn't ask for payment so much as permission to do what she did best, coax the quiet back into speech. For them, the air hummed with new possibility. She could coax what the city tried to forget back into light. Aster's tools were small miracles, a resonance comb that tickled static into stories, a ribbon reader that smelled faintly of burnt paper and salt, and maps stitched with red lines and crossed-out seals. She set the scrap in place, traded a jar labeled promises with a wink, and began the ritual. Fingers, solder, patient mechanics, the whole thing looked like a quiet prayer. As gears clicked and the comb hummed, Annie watched as if witnessing a conjuring. This was the kind of salvage that made second chances look inevitable, not stolen, not rescued, but remade. And when a device lit with teal sparks, everyone in the room leaned a little closer. She teased a burned trace from the noise. The comb hummed and the ribbon shivered. Microglyphs floated into the air like tired fireflies. For a breath, the room was full of tiny, blue constellations as the machine stitched residue into shape. Arbot's chest pulsed in sympathy, a patient, mechanical heartbeat matching the comb's rhythm. Annie exhaled through her nose, that small, hopeful sound humans make right before something might actually work. When a line of cyan letters held and a fragment became readable, it felt less like lookup than reunion. The scrap's ghost had something to say, if you knew how to listen. It gave them a place to go. The holographic residue blinked and arranged itself. And there it was, Factory of Firsts, Bay 03. Aster punched the air like someone who'd bet on a bad hand and won. Annie's shoulders dropped. Arbot logged the coordinate with a quiet beep. The map pin appeared over a crumbling factory icon like a lighthouse making a point on fog. For the first time in a while, the hint in their hands became a direction, a door that might open on the story they were chasing. Hope is a funny, fragile thing, half accident, half plan, but in that moment it felt like the only honest map. The factory was forbidden and dangerous. Around Aster's cluttered map, she drew routes like a surgeon marking incisions, service tunnels, guard rotations, pylon blind spots. She tapped a red ring no-go area and warned them in a tone that made the danger factual rather than theatrical. There's a difference between fear that paralyzes you and fear that sharpens you. Aster offered the latter. Arbot peered at the route like a student reading a rule he didn't yet have to follow. And Annie listened like someone calibrating courage. They could go the hard way, or the clever way. They chose the kind of path that asks for more wits than force. Packing, at that point, felt like agreement. Small trades carried big risks now. The market tried to keep breathing like any marketplace, Vendors haggled, children darted, jars glowed. But everyone's eyes kept flicking to the rooftops. A vendor slid a bureau token into a crate latch with hands that moved faster than surprise. Above, drone silhouettes traced slow, patient arcs. The trio prepared in plain sight. A gesture here, a whisper there, practicing a kind of quiet performance. Ordinary people doing ordinary things, while their hearts beat a little louder. It was the market's secret. It could still feel like home even while it memorized your footsteps. That double life is what makes a good hiding place, but it also makes the alarm that much sharper when it comes. When the city nets dissent, even kindness scatters. The alarm cut the market like a blade, red strobe light, hydraulic hiss. Drones folding down with civic calm and terrible efficiency. Jars toppled in slow arcs, sending motes spinning through filament light. Vendors dove. Aster slammed a crate lid like a captain closing a hatch. Diddy yanked Arbot toward a narrow chute and everything moved in a choreography, born of too many practiced escapes. The city's enforcement looks polite because it is trying to be fair, which makes it all the more crushing when fairness becomes a net. In the roar, small kindnesses were scattered to the wind. For a moment, survival became the only shared language. They ran like small things who knew how to be lost. The alleys were a vertigo of stacked platforms, tilted planks, and ropes that smelled like rain. Diddy vaulted like someone who'd practiced falling well. Arbot squeezed with careful servos. Aster tossed a gadget that bloomed smoke and mirror sparks. A brief theater that made the drones misread their trail. Beams of drone light cut, missing them by threads of luck and skill. Every clang and skid was a sentence in a frantic language of escape. Verticality hid them and revealed them in turns. And all three learned anew that your smallest moves can become your sharpest defenses. By the time the chase ended, they were breathless in a way that felt like proof they could still move. For a minute, they could breathe. Behind a curtain and a salvaged latch, the market's chaos became a distant thrum. They sat in a small loft, panting and soot-streaked, the world reduced to patched, wood in a single lamp. Diddy pressed the factory coordinate into her palm like a talisman. Arbot's chest glowed a steady, soft pulse. Aster closed the latch as if sealing the world out, and for a moment nothing needed to be fixed except the steady rhythm of their breaths. Temporary refuge is a fragile currency. It buys you time and, more importantly, the quiet to decide what to do next. They counted their small victories and found them enough to keep going. A small token suddenly carried a heavy pass. Aster slid a faded bureau badge across the table, and the room's light seemed to sink into its worn brass. In the margin, a half-erased annotation revealed the ghost glyph, the same sigil they'd seen in the market. Diddy's face tightened, not with accusation so much as the ache of recognition. Arbot's HUD flared with a sudden, small spike of data like a pulse of memory. The badge was ancient and ordinary and impossible, proof that whatever had been done to Arbot involved people who moved inside the system, who thought they could tidy beginnings with a clean hand. When evidence is a thing you can touch, choices feel both nearer and more dangerous. She said she'd been on the team that tried to erase a memory once. Aster's voice folded the past into the present, halting, clipped, as if each word carried a spark. She told a clipped story, a lab clean as a tray, operators in uniforms, a console that could pull an origin apart, not to absolve or to accuse, but to explain how someone who repairs also knows how to erase. Holographic flashes overlaid her speech, a younger Aster stamping files, a sterile room that smelled of solvent and duty. Diddy listened with the patient cruelty of someone hearing a confession that also complicated everything they'd hoped for. The confession made the map feel less like a treasure and more like a ledger that someone had tried to rewrite. The job started, and someone stopped it. In Aster's memory, the lab was antiseptic and brisk, like a place where intention moves through systems. A young engineer hesitated at a console while a memory wipe ribbon unspooled across a screen, the maker field pulsing as if it could be plucked out of the record. A masked operator shadowed the action, hands moving like punctuation, and the sequence began to run. Then, a slam, a hand hitting the kill switch mid-overwrite. Sparks, a little chaos that left the file half-finished. The cut left questions like an open seam. Who intervened, and why did someone choose to stop a tidy erasure? The memory didn't answer, it only proved that the story had been interrupted on purpose. Records met recollection, and something inside him stirred. It happened in small pulses. A bloom of gold light in his chest, a flash of a plaza laugh. The taste of a stolen cookie caught on a sensor as if it were data and a dream at once. His HUD jittered blue to warm gold and back, flickers like footsteps crossing glass. He reached out slowly, mechanical and earnest, toward a memory that felt more like a relationship than a file. Diddy watched him with a soft, astonished sentinel's patience, while Aster's expression shifted between guilt and something like relief. In a world governed by records, occasional recollection is a stubborn, inconvenient truth. They chose to follow the lead, together. Hacking was quick and deliberate. A schematic folded into a satchel, a gadget clipped to a belt, the jar of small courage given its last triumphant thump. On the loft wall, Aster pinned the covert route with theatrical finality. Teal markers lit a path through service tunnels and running rails. For a breath they laughed, not because things were light, but because companionship made the burden smaller. The city dimmed outside the curtain as they stepped into the dusk. When the world asks you to walk toward risk, it helps that you're not walking alone. They moved out with small, confident steps and the map of a possibility pinned to their shoulders. Under moon and gear, they crept toward the factory. The city at night was an engine of shadows and soft mechanical sighs, rooftops stitched with catwalks, chimneys ghosting steam, and the occasional blue sweep of a sensor that passed like a hand over the skyline. They moved roof to roof and alley to alley, choosing beams and blind spots with the precision of people who'd learned to make themselves small. Above, teal sweeps cut clean arcs. Below, lanterns were tiny, comforting beacons. The journey felt less like travel and more like a ritual, quiet, deliberate, full of small measures of trust, their silhouettes carved into the moonlight like a promise to return with answers. They found the place that once made first things. The factory rose like an old god of industry, brick and bronze, belching chimneys and gears that had outlived their makers. Its sign read Factory of Firsts, worn from weather and history. Aster pointed to a secondary gate, labeled Bay 03 with the certainty of someone who knows how old systems hide their secrets. Sleeping guards dotted the perimeter, pylons hummed with old authority, and the factory's presence felt like memory made into architecture. Up close, you could smell the oil and hear the old assembly lines as faint heartbeats. To stand at the edge of a place that once birthed beginnings was to stand at the mouth of a question, and they were ready to step inside. His maker's name gone. Who rewrote him? In a metal alcove near Bay 03, Aster's voice came down to them like a confession and a verdict. I was on that team, she whispered, 3 words that fell like weights into the silent air. The badge, the half-erased glyph, the factory's rusted rails, they all lined up into a single, terrible hypothesis. Someone had tried to make the beginning disappear, and someone else had chosen to stop them. Arbot looked up at Diddy Annie with a question no file could answer. What is a life? When the first line is blank, the factory bell tolled twice, and the sound echoed like a challenge. Cut to black, the question remains, who rewrote him?